Advent, Sue did such a great job last week of helping us to understand that Advent is not only a time of spiritual preparation, but it's also a time where we get to be reminded of the support of Spirit in our lives. Or as we say in unity, the Christ within, that individualized spirit that we are. Last week, Sue talked about faith, and while most traditions don't look at faith as a spiritual quality, faith is a uniquely human quality that we develop through our willingness to review the steps that we've taken in our life and how well they have turned out for us. In comparison, the subject today, peace. Peace is definitely a quality of our Christ nature, of our true nature. It's a quality that if you sense into it for yourselves right now, because it can be different for each one of us. I know as I was sensing into it this week, it was quiet and still and spacious. And there was a sense that I was good. Do you know that I was complete, not deficient. And that somehow, even though not everything in the world around me was perfect, not everything in the world around me was peaceful, that there was some sense of okayness with my life. Nothing was ruffling me. Oh, and internally, I was not getting prodded and poked by my judge or by my ego. It's quiet and still. Do you know that experience for yourself? One of the things that's always cracked me up about my own spiritual journey is that sometimes I'm so used to the experience of my life that I'm not used to naming it. I'm not used to drawing attention to it, and yet it's important spiritually for us to draw attention to these spiritual qualities. Otherwise, we can not recognize when we are in this state of consciousness, this state of being that is so supportive. I really loved what Sue Sicking had to say. This is the Reverend Sue Sicking. I don't know what years Sue lived, but there's a lot written by Sue, and there's a lot of respect in the unity movement for Sue. In her book, Letters to Adam, she wrote, and I'm picking key pieces off of 3 different pages. Peace is one of the greatest, finest, and highest states of being. It is one in which it does not matter what happens to us, because we know that something is sustaining us, and wherein man is complete in himself. We can bet that it was written a few years ago with that statement, wherein man is complete in himself. We use broader language today, don't we? But you get the sense of it. There is not only a sense of something else sustaining us, but also this awareness that we are complete in ourselves. Take a moment just to allow yourself to settle. Maybe take another deep breath. And see if you can't, if it's not your experience now, see if you can't relate to this quality of spirit within you called peace. The thing that I find interesting about peace in my own experience is how quickly it can leave me. I came into the church on Tuesday to do some work, and have you ever had one of those really satisfying days of work where you get to your desk and there's a mountain of things for you to look at, and when you leave, 8 hours later, you feel like you really got the majority, if not all of it done, and that you did it well. And that was my day on Tuesday. And as I was driving away from the church, I started, feeling, oh yeah, I'm feeling really relaxed, present, still, quiet. And I had to kind of chuckle. I went, oh, I bet I'm experiencing peace. And I had one errand to run before I went home. And I'm not sure, probably some of you techies could explain this to me, but when I came out of that errand, I plugged my car in to make my trek back up the mountain to where Stuart and I live. And my iPhone told me that it was going to be over 5 hours for me to get home. That function where it comes up. And I'm still in this state of peace, and I thought, oh my goodness, my GPS must be really malfunctioning. But I thought I should check it out. So I called Stuart, who was at home, and I said, could you just put in your GPS what it's going to take if you were to drive from our house back down to the church? He goes, it says it's going to be over 5 hours. And I thought, what on earth? I said, well, could you look at the route? Is there any red in the route? He goes, nope, there's no red in the route. So I thought, well, I'm gonna come home anyway. And I'm driving along, and I'm feeling pretty peaceful. I'm feeling expanded and quiet, kind of one with the driving, if you will. And all of a sudden, monkey mind started. You know how it goes. What are you doing? You're going to get up to the entrance to Berthoud Pass, and that gate's going to be closed, and you're going to have to drive back, and what a waste of your time. And I'm sure, it was a major snowstorm when you drove down this morning on Berthoud Pass. It's probably feet and feet of snow by now, and, you really should turn back. And suddenly, I'm not feeling peaceful. It's like it's gone. And I'm not sure why. So I happened, when I got home and later this week, happened to pick up Unity's The Spirit of Christmas. This is Unity's Advent booklet. We have some at the church if you don't have yours yet. And I opened up today's writing, which is by the Reverend Kurt Condra, a friend of mine. And he does, I think, a beautiful job of explaining not only how it happens, but what we're to do when the activity of our ego, whether it's just those voices in our head or whether it's that critical voice that jumps on us. Kurt uses the example of, or the contrast, let's say, of Mary's pregnancy with Elizabeth's pregnancy. Both of them, the angel Gabriel came to announce that they would be carrying child. And the fun thing is that he points out, when Mary was told that she was going to have a baby, she had her own doubts come up, right? She was concerned that, well, I don't know if she was concerned, but she said, you do know I'm a virgin, right? That I'm not married, And Gabriel was very encouraging of her and comforting. All things are possible with God. But when Gabriel came to John the Baptist's dad, because John the Baptist was also a miracle birth, and announced that he and his wife Elizabeth were having a baby, I think very reasonably, Zechariah was doubtful. He goes, my wife and I are in our 90s. How can that possibly happen? We've never even had children before. We've never been able to have children. And poor Zechariah, he was chastised. And the angel Gabriel took his voice away, made him mute for the rest of Elizabeth's pregnancy. Now, why is it? Why is it that Mary would be encouraged and comforted where Zechariah was chastised and his voice was taken away? Kurt so beautifully points out that metaphysically, the feminine is associated with our heart, with our intuition, with our openness. And when we are birthing forth the Christ, how important it is, if we're even going to say yes to that, how important it is that we have an open heart, that we be able to hear through our intuition, that we simply be open-natured and trusting. Whereas the male usually represents coming from our head, valuing our rational or logical mind. And also I'll point out that the ego, which is just a series of deep-seated beliefs that have become patterned ways of being, lives in our head also. That it's treated differently. It's as if the Bible is saying, in order to welcome in the miracle of Spirit, including our peace, that we need to be open, receptive, and we need to learn how to quiet, to mute the activity of our head. Here's what Kurt says. Muting the perpetual cycle of thoughts is a gift that brings greater peace. For Zechariah, muteness was imposed. We're called to mute our own thoughts. Now, I was really happy that Kurt didn't say, so just think some other thought. Because, I was raised in unity, and that's what I was raised with. Just change your thoughts. Just think about something else. Supplant that thought with a different thought. And boy, I worked on that hard. Have any of you guys worked on that? I worked and worked as a kid on that. But it's interesting that as much as we might want the activity of our head to be different, it doesn't work for me just to shut it down. Now, let me say that is not always true. If I don't have a deep-seated belief about something and I catch myself going into a pattern of thinking where I go, oh, this is probably not in my best interest, I can usually change that. But that night, driving in my car with all that chatter, I don't think it would have worked. I don't think I've been very successful at, putting a lid on that and saying, we're just not going to think that way anymore. So Kurt, just to, give you some opportunity for variety, Kurt brings up Eckhart Tolle's technique, which I have practiced. I have forgotten that I practiced this for probably a couple of years, of pausing in the gap. Kurt tells you to pause in the gap between thoughts. For me, I paused. Well, I did that, I'm sure, but where it really became effective for me is I learned to listen to the gap between sentences and even between words, because it brings the focus to something other than the message of the words, that the words become almost just a noise. They don't catch you as much, and we begin to recognize the stillness, the quiet, the space that is spirit and that is peaceful. For myself, that night, as I'm driving along, I'm a big fan of whatever you want to call it, the RAIN process or inquiry, and I knew this voice. This is the beautiful thing about being willing to pause and get to know what's going on for us. I knew this voice. This is a part of my ego structure, a young part that likes to be prepared, likes to know what's going on. And I understand that. I was praised for being prepared. I was chastised myself for not being prepared as a kid. And I had some pretty traumatic experiences as a kid of those times where I felt unprepared, where I was just sort of wandering around as a kid does, open-hearted, and open-minded. And so this part of me is well-programmed. And so I've learned, what does it need? And in that drive, I came to a gas station in Golden, Colorado. I pulled off, and I pulled up the GPS for myself. I had never really opened it. I'd just seen that message that it was going to be more than 5 hours to get home. And what Stuart hadn't noticed when he pulled up the GPS was that, yes, it was blue, but it was routing me all the way to Vail, then across to Steamboat, and then back to Granby and Grand Lake. That's a long drive. That's like, over 5 hours. And I said to that young part of me, well, maybe you were right. It was a whiteout snowstorm this morning when we came across, is it Berthoud Pass? And maybe it's been snowing all day and you just can't get through. So I went on the CDOT website, and sure enough, it shows a map, and it shows all the major highways except Trail Ridge Road are open and blue, and it did say that Berthoud Pass was snowy. Well, I'm comfortable driving in snow, so I said, I still think we should press on. And as I began to drive again, with that information, I began to relax again. And in that relaxing, found myself in this amazing place of peace. Did the peace go away? No, that's a very interesting thing about these qualities of spirit. They are not impacted by the activity of our mind. They're not impacted by our intellect. They're not impacted by the monkey mind. They continue to be the, what would you say, the perch from which we can stand, which we can rest. It's only that chatter distracts us. And no reason to beat ourselves up. It's pretty distracting. And so our opportunity always is to pause and to take care of that aspect of our individual self that needs some attention in that moment, so that we can be dropped back into the peace of our being. Kurt says, it probably actually wasn't a punishment to take away Zechariah's ability to speak. We all could stand, right, to have that quieting of the mind. For me, that quieting has come as spiritual practice. And for me personally, years of spiritual practice. And only in the last couple of years have I really noticed how quiet my mind can get. Those practices include prayer and meditation. For me, inquiry. That simple question of, what's going on for me now? So that the space can be opened. for me to know what quality of spirit is rising in me now. Kurt quoted John 14:27. This is a passage that we're all familiar with. We usually read it this way: "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives." But he was reading from the New Living Translation. I'm sorry, not reading. He was quoting the New Living Translation, which I had never heard of before. I wonder how many translations of the Bible there are. There's probably infinite number, right? But here's how it reads: I'm leaving you with a gift. I'm leaving you with a gift. Peace of mind and heart. And the peace I give the world, the peace I give, the world cannot give. So don't be troubled or afraid. And so we see that it's not really, this is the way it was worded in the Bible. What we experience, what we have the opportunity to experience, is that one of the qualities of our nature is peace. And that when our spirit is at rest as us, the experience is peaceful. And that peace, knowing that we are sustained, knowing that we are complete as we are, knowing that the world is somehow manageable from this state, is a tremendous gift, a peace like nothing in the world can give us. And so this week, I invite you to pause and pay attention to the gap, to be mindful of what's happening in your experience. If there is Zechariah consciousness coming up that is distracting you, as I was distracted in my drive to Grand Lake, to be curious. What do you need now to relax so that I can settle into the quiet stillness of my nature? Don't be angry at that part. It actually needs your love and support. It's young. It doesn't have the capacity that you as a spiritual being have. And see for yourself, as that part relaxes, that you not only move into that peaceful, receptive state that is open to the unfolding of that Christ Spirit in you, the miracle of all that is possible in your life. Just notice the quiet and the stillness. As we move now into a time of some meditation together. As we enter into this time, it occurs to me that for so many years I thought that I needed to have a quiet mind in meditation. But I came to understand that meditation is really a practice of not getting hooked by the activity of my mind. I didn't need to shut my mind down. but to put my attention in something other than the chatter. To find the gap, if you will. Or to concentrate on the movement of the air in and out of your chest and your belly. Or just the simple stillness of the koth center at your belly button, the center of your gravity. And so I invite you to gently relax now. Relax into whatever your mind is doing. To come to the recognition that your mind can do whatever your mind wants. The essence of who you are is still there. In whatever form it's taking in this moment. If it's peace, it's going to be quiet and still. If it's strength, it's going to be much more robust and oriented towards the truth. If it's value, you will know without doubt your value in this moment. And if you find your attention coming back to the activity of your mind, just simply move it back to the movement of your breath or the stillness of that koth center near your belly button. From this place of our nature, we are inherently open and receptive to the activity of spirit, open to the unfolding, open to the request for surrender, open to the guidance. This quality of peace is key in bringing forth the Christ, allowing the Christ to be born in us. And so we sit quietly now for a few moments, allowing Spirit to be Spirit as us.